I'm your host, Scott Ritzema. As you see, our guest, Chad Kreuzer, is going to be talking about the topic of beverages today. Very important topic. We spend more time, frankly, finding beverages sometimes than we do eating our meals. So what are we drinking? Is it good for us? What are things we should avoid? What are things we should make sure to incorporate? But first, I want to do a free book giveaway. In fact, they have a QR code for this, and it's just my email address. I am personally so in love with and enamored with this book. There are so many different covers for it. It's the same book I'm holding up. I went to my bookshelf. I'm like, how many different covers are there for The Great Controversy? If you have not read this book, viewer, this is like the number one book I recommend outside, of course, the Bible itself. And there's another cover too, right there on the QR code in the image, The Great Controversy. What it is it's a history of the Christian church since the time of Christ. So ever since the time of the New Testament, what went on after that? And, you know, there's a lot of, frankly, dark stuff that have happened in the history of so-called Christianity. And there are a lot of skeptics who ask valid questions like, if that's Christianity, I don't think I want anything to do with that. Well, the Bible calls it Antichrist, actually. So then it transitions into prophecy so that you can understand what's coming next in Earth's history according to Bible prophecy. So history, the first half of the book, prophecy, the second half of the book. You guys know I'm a history guy, so I love that, but I also love Bible prophecy. I know I've recommended our listeners watch the 14-part prophecy series that I've got over at the Belt of Truth channel. So email me. We will send you a free book. Literally in the mail. We have people that support us to be able to do that. I'm going to personally take care of that today. So email me, scottritzema@gmail.com, or use the QR code there, and we'll get that in your hands. If you're overseas, you know, the shipping, the mailing is a little cost prohibitive, but we'll get you a digital copy, digital links into your email inbox as well. So let's bring up Chad. Actually, I'd like to introduce him. He's got a little bio that we've written for him, and I happen to know Chad well. We go back a ways. He's a health educator and founder of Health and Homestead. Health and Homestead is his YouTube channel. He's also beginning a brand new in-person health retreat, health and wellness site in Ohio. So listeners, if you're anywhere near Ohio, outside of Columbus, you can find them at Forest Hill Wellness. There's the QR code to follow Chad Kreuzer on his YouTube channel. Lots of good information on health and also homesteading, country living, growing things. So Chad, if you wouldn't mind, before we start talking about beverages, give us a little bit of an intro to the new Health and Wellness Institute, Forest Hill Wellness.
Well, thanks for having me, Scott. Yeah, we are starting. We have a facility. I'm here right now, and it is about an hour and a half east of Columbus, Ohio. It is in the second largest Amish community in the world. It has, I think, around 83,000 Amish people in the area. It's actually a beautiful location. I know people don't think of a lot of beauty in Ohio, but where we are is pretty good size hills with beautiful views up on the property. And it's a place where people who maybe are struggling with depression, anxiety, maybe heart disease issues, diabetes, arthritis, various lifestyle issues. It is a place that they can come for roughly an 18-day period and stay in a beautiful location, eat fantastically healthy food, and have some natural remedies and these kinds of things over the course of this period. They'll have their blood work done at the beginning and at the end of the session to see the results on some of their health markers, things that they can see actually the progress while they're here. And we're really excited. It's not 100% ready. It should be ready by about October. So next month, we've had, because we're in an Amish community, we're having Amish people build the wood furniture, and that'll be here tomorrow. So we're excited for all that's going to be going on here.
That's awesome. So you and your wife are the directors of Forest Hill Wellness, and you're servicing the local community, and people can come from a distance as well, I'm assuming.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Anybody can come from wherever, but we are, as much as possible, looking to connect with the people here. The Amish people, wonderful people, very special people, but they do have a number of health issues. Sometimes they're almost like third world issues. In some of the cases, in other cases, they have some of the same normal diseases like everyday American might have like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, depression, and so forth. So those things are pretty common. But sometimes there are some other issues that they struggle with, just not knowing a lot of some of them don't know as much about, hygiene and so forth.
Well, I appreciate hearing more of these types of institutes popping up because, Living Springs in Alabama loves seeing other people doing and replicating really God's blueprint because we need more, not fewer of these. And we are in cooperation together in the work of God. So that's a beautiful thing. Thank you for sharing. And later on, once you've had some experience with people coming to Forest Hill Wellness, I want to have you back so you can tell some of the stories of people. I know you already have stories because you and your wife have been in health ministry for some time at, going to people, helping people remotely and so on. But here we are today to talk about beverages. And I want to ask you, you've done a lot of research on a lot of health topics. In fact, folks, I'm not saying this just because Chad is here. I would tell you this in any setting. He's one of my top go-to guys when I want to, okay, what have you learned from the research? What do we actually know and what do we not know about health? So he's a wealth of knowledge on this from not just research, but from biblical understanding. Chad's background is actually in Bible teaching, being a prophecy seminar teacher and documentary filmmaker on these types of things in history and Bible prophecy, kind of like the Great Controversy, that sort of topic. But Chad, give us sort of your intro. How should we think about beverages?
It's a good question. People drink, by and large, a mixture of obviously water and non-water beverages. Obviously, everything has water as a base. And Scott knows me growing up. When I grew up, all we had at my house pretty much was Mountain Dew, Coke. I almost never drank water in my entire life growing up. I mean, it was a few times, and that was a strange experience. And so I'm not probably the most likely candidate to be talking about this issue with you. But I want to start off talking about some things that may not be so healthy and then transition to the benefits of some of the simple things that God gave us to take internally as a liquid. But I want to start off with one of the most common things that are consumed today, although it's actually less now than it was formerly. There's all kinds of trends in social media. Some are good, some are bad. One of the good ones going right now is a suggestion by many so-called influencers suggesting to get away from alcohol. And that is a wonderful idea because when it comes to alcohol has so many side effects. And I won't go on and on about that, but one of them is the research has shown repeatedly a causal link between alcohol and cancer of things like the esophagus, the larynx, the pharynx, the mouth, colon, rectum, breast cancer, liver cancer. And these are just to name a few, but research has specifically shown that as you consume it, and you may think, okay, so if I'm like an alcoholic, it'll increase my risk. Sure, it does at that point, but the research even shows in very small amounts that they're now saying there is no safe level of alcohol for these kinds of cancers. So like a woman who drinks even a very small amount of alcohol is at measured increased risk for something like breast cancer. And that's obviously one of the most feared cancers for women. And thinking about that, I want to talk, many people, you might hear people say, well, Chad, but what about that research out of France? You may remember something called the French paradox. They had looked at French people and they noticed when they looked at nations around the world, they had noticed nations that maybe ate higher saturated fat were more likely to have things like heart disease or heart attacks. But there was one outlier, and that was France. And they found that France didn't have as high of levels of heart disease as they would have suggested by their diet, or at least they would have imagined by their diet. And so they called that the French paradox. And they thought, well, maybe it's the wine drinking that somehow combats the effect of a semi-unhealthy diet. And so that was kind of the idea for a while. They said, well, maybe alcohol, or specifically wine, is good to help you avoid heart disease. Well, it turns out, after further investigation, what they discovered is that physicians in France were less likely to declare a death from heart disease. So there was actually no French paradox at all.
Wow.
just as high death rates from heart disease. It's not that they were being shady per se. Maybe you just call it natural causes or something like that. Whereas other countries might be more specific. Oh yeah, you died of a heart attack, you died of a stroke, something cardiovascular related, and so that was in the data. So it turns out alcohol doesn't seem to really have any benefit when it comes to heart disease. Now, any benefits that you'll get from alcohol, you can imagine, come from what? I mean,
From the
grapes.
grapes? Yeah.
Yes. So you'll get all the benefits of the phytonutrients, everything that comes in it, you will get from the grape itself rather than from the alcohol. So the alcohol has a negative impact, but there's another common drink that is especially thought to be healthful, considered much more healthful than what people would think of alcohol per se, but it's called kombucha. I'm sure you've, Scott, run into that. You go to maybe if you go to a health food store or something, they have their kombucha drinks there. And I've talked to people, and one of the things that they report is that when they drink kombucha, they say, man, I just feel good. It feels really nice. Like, I don't know, there's something about it. And they often say, well, maybe that's because it has good bacteria. It has antioxidants and other substances that are making people feel good. Well, it turns out it's probably not actually from the good bacteria and so forth. So it's been researched, and what they found is that when kombucha is home brewed, it's basically a fermented drink. And when it's home brewed, it typically has about 1% to 2% alcohol, but it can be as high as 3% alcohol. And you may know that some wine coolers can have 3% alcohol. So when people say, man, when I drink kombucha, I just feel good. Well, that doesn't surprise me because it does feel good when you drink alcohol. And now you may say, Chad, but it's not supposed to be that high when it's sold in the grocery stores or in the health food stores. And that's true. It's not supposed to be, but there's very little oversight in that field. And so unless that company is very particular to make sure they have lower levels of alcohol in there, it is something that is also an alcoholic drink unless they've absolutely made sure. So do I think kombucha is a go-to drink for health? I don't really think so at all. You may say, well, then where can we get the good bacteria that we need? Things like the lactobacillus bacterium. And it turns out you can get that from simply eating vegetables, eating cabbage. You don't have to ferment the cabbage to get lactobacillus bacterium. You can just eat a variety of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and you will get the good bacteria that you need to feed your microbiome, to feed the good bacteria, and you'll feed them. Well, you'll get the bacteria there, but you'll also be feeding them the good fiber that they need to digest, and then they'll give you a byproduct called short chain fatty acids that can lower inflammation in the body and help to enhance your health. So just eat the good diversity there of fruits and vegetables. Well, I want to talk about one of the things that people use for sleep is alcohol. I used to drink quite a bit, and boy, it does put you to sleep. But the research actually shows that the sleep that you get when you've been drinking is not as good. Even if you felt like you were asleep all night long, it doesn't have the same restful impact that you have if you're not drinking, even though it does help you fall asleep. And now looking at this, people, okay, well, if alcohol is not so great for sleep, even though it helps you fall asleep, people think, well, maybe I'll just take sleeping pills, but there's all kinds of side effects to that, like headache, constipation, dizziness. We could go on and on. Daytime sleepiness. So it's not seemingly often doing what you're hoping it will do. But is there something we could drink instead of beer or wine or alcohol to help us get good sleep? Well, there's been some research on, it's interesting, it's what alcohol, or at least beer, is often made out of, hops. Hops tea. You can make a tea where it's 0 alcohol whatsoever, no alcohol. I mean, you could get a tea bag full of hops. You can go online or go to your local health food store and you may have hops tea there. And it's historically been used as an ingredient in beer, but when it's made into a tea, they've found that it works. What they did is they did a study, was conducted on nurses, and these were nurses specifically who worked night shift, And this study was to determine the sedative impact of hops tea or a hops drink, non-alcoholic, completely zero alcohol, on individuals that had a work stress experience. So they're in kind of a stressful work environment. And in the study, they were specifically looking at nurses, and they were to drink this hops drink, non-alcoholic, with their supper, in this case for 14 days. Now, we actually don't suggest often drinking with a meal, but this is what they did in the study. It's better to drink, and we'll get back to that in just a moment, a while before or a while after the meal, but we'll come back to that. And so these women would drink this with their meal and their evening meal, and then they would monitor them with something called ActiWatch. It was just a watch that could help see how much they were rolling around while they were sleeping. And what they found was that the results is that the time it took to fall asleep, they call that sleep latency, it decreased. So they fell asleep faster compared to those who were in a control group, and the amount of movement and activity during the night compared to the control group was decreased. So they seemed to roll around, wake up less. And one of the other additional benefits to this, something like a hops tea, is that it lowered their levels of anxiety compared to the control group. And that's, once again, one of the things people go to beer for, is to lower their stress levels, their anxiety. The thing is, it works to do that, but the trouble is, research has actually shown that we have stress hormones, things like cortisol. And if you never drink alcohol and then you begin to drink alcohol, you will increase your cortisol levels when you're not drinking alcohol. And so you're going to live with higher stress hormones. And so you're going to be in this perpetual habit that you're going to feel as if you need the alcohol to calm you down. And this is one of the things that alcohol does. It's just like normal drugs. They feel great the first time you do them, but then after a while you need them just to feel semi-normal. And alcohol will do that, but you can get the benefits without the side effects by just drinking a hops tea rather than going to the alcohol and having all the side effects. Now, the research is clear that using it moderately has a benefit. That's something like around 2 grams. Typically, the way people do a tea is like a teaspoon full of the herb, or you can just go buy some online, like a standard tea bags or what have you. And another benefit is they said that it seems also to have an anti-carcinogenic impact by taking hops. And we were actually told over 100 years ago that hops tea will induce sleep. So hops is a way to get the benefits without the side effects. Well, I want to talk about another thing that is considered to be a healthy drink. It's purported all the time that way. And there are some health benefits, but what I'm looking for is to have remedies that have benefits but don't have side effects, don't have negative impact. I'll give you an example, something like the European Society of Cardiology. They may put out a report that coffee drinking is associated with increased longevity, that there's health benefits to coffee. And that I don't actually doubt that, because pretty much almost any plant is going to have some kind of a benefit. That doesn't surprise me. But are there any side effects that would preclude me from or keep me from drinking it? I'm going to share with you a fascinating study out of the University of Florida. They conducted 4 different studies to see the impact of caffeine on behavior. I'm just going to touch on, for time's sake, 2 of them. And so what they did is they had people, upon entering a store, when they would come in, they would give them a drink. They would either give them a caffeinated drink, a decaffeinated drink, or water. And then they would drink it. And what they discovered is that those who drank the caffeinated drink while they were in the store ended up spending about 50% more money while they were in the store. 50%, which is quite incredible. And so you might be thinking, you walk into a store and they give you a free coffee and you're like, wow, isn't that nice of them? Just that they would do it. And seems kind of nice when somebody gives you a gift, but sometimes the gift has, in this case, it has a side effect that it might make you, I'll go on with the next study and then I'll explain what they say. So then they thought, let's try it on people who are at home, or, maybe people just, because where do people buy stuff today? Many people don't even go out to stores anymore. So they just go online. You think, well, if I'm online, that may not be the case. So then they tested people who were doing online shopping. And what they found was that while online shopping, they also spent significantly more money while, more on impulse purchases while they were online shopping, if they were on caffeine. And so the conclusion that they come to, in their words, what they end up saying is that they say that caffeine makes people more, they say, impulsive, and lowers levels of what they call self-control. So they say caffeine lowers levels of self-control. And I don't know about you, but I've never sat around thinking, man, I just have too much self-control. I want to lower that a little bit. No, I mean, nobody has, because you might think, well, maybe something like OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, maybe that's too much self-control. No, that's also another form of not having self-control. And I don't say that as an insult, it's just the reality. And so maybe one of the things is, when I saw this research, this impact of caffeine on self-control. Now, we do know other things like drugs lower levels of self-control, alcohol lowers levels of self-control. And you may say, Chad, are you saying that caffeine lowers it as much as drugs or alcohol? No, I'm sure not as much, but to a degree, it does lower your self-control. And when I thought about this, because I am a Christian, I read the Bible every day, and it reminded me of Galatians chapter 5, 22 and 23. Many of you probably know it. It's what we call the section in the Bible on the fruit of the Spirit, where it says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faith, gentleness, and self-control. So what it says is, if you're a Christian, we should receive the Holy Spirit. And the biblical way to know that you have the Holy Spirit is, do you have the fruit of the Spirit? It's kind of like, how do you know an apple tree is an apple tree? Well, it's what kind of fruit does it grow? If it grows apples, well, that's a fact. It's an apple tree. How do you know you're a Christian walking in the Spirit of God? It's, do you have the fruit that the Christian tree should have? And that's the fruit of the Spirit, which involves things like love, joy, peace, and ultimately the last one is self-control. Which means if I were to do something that lowers the amount of self-control that I have, or my capacity for self-control, it means, to some degree at least, I am lowering the ability for the Holy Spirit to work in my life.
Wow.
And so because of that, I just decided I'm not going to do that anymore. And as Scott knows, I mean, that's all I used to drink: coffee, tea, sodas, what have you. And I was, because I never went a day ever in my entire life without it, that from a child, I can never remember going a day without it until I went on a backpacking trip in Colorado. And I was out there and I couldn't have my coffee or whatever. And I didn't even think about it. I just was drinking the water from the river and doing what we had to do. But I had a headache for days, and they just thought it was altitude sickness. And but finally, after like 5 days, someone said, hey, do you drink a lot of caffeine? I was like, oh yeah, all the time. And so they gave me a Folger single, which is like a tea bag full of coffee. And I made a cup of coffee, and not long after, my headache of 5 days went away. And I realized for the first time, I am physically addicted to caffeine. And at that moment, I thought, I don't want to be a slave. Like, I don't want to be addicted. That was the first time I actually realized I was addicted to something. And it was at that point that I decided to, I see a comment, coffee.
Freedom.
Yeah. Yes.
By the way, I can testify, having been there also. The Mountain Dew, man, that was such a big addiction for me. And I got off caffeine too. Mine was like 3 days of terrible headaches, and then freedom. And there's no more needing to have it. By the way, I knew Chad as a teenager. I got to tell you, most of us went to school with a backpack full of books. Chad literally went to school with a backpack full of, it was a Mountain Dew ripoff. It was called Surge.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's not exaggerating. In fact, he's understating it. Where you've clawed back from, Chad, by God's grace, from the beverages of your youth. And I love how by the way, you're saying It's not that we need to not get benefits. Okay, there may be some good qualities in wine, but it's combined with poison known as alcohol, which as soon as that hits your body begins detoxifying it because alcohol is a poison. So eat grapes and you get the benefits. And same thing with the beer. Take the hops tea. Same thing with the kombucha. You're trying to get your probiotics. Eat vegetables. And so God's provided everything. It's not like we're going to deprive ourselves even. You're depriving yourself of an addiction, sure, but I'll take that. But were you going to look at a comment there? And yeah, hey guys, if you want to add any questions on the screen, we can talk to folks who are watching live.
Yeah, someone says coffee is good for you, whether it's all you ever drink or not. And I'm not here to argue. I mean, we have freedom of choice to make any decisions we want. But to me, I'm looking for things that have benefits without side effects. And so are there benefits to it? Once again, sure. I don't deny that at all. I'm not afraid to acknowledge that. But for someone like me, I want to have the best self-control that I can possibly have. And so I can have things that are, and here's the thing, when you start living a healthy lifestyle, you have energy all day. If you're getting good sleep, eating a healthy diet, you have great energy anyway, so you don't need it. And by the way, one more thing, they did a study comparing doing stair climber exercise to caffeine in the morning. So you're just climbing stairs, you're doing some stair steppers to caffeine, and the stair stepping was just as good or better than caffeine. So it's not that you have to have it. I know people feel like they have to if you night after night have short sleep, and sure, it can make you feel like you did sleep, even though it's giving you a fake energy, or at least feel as if you did sleep. But the good thing is, if you live a healthy lifestyle, you won't even feel the need for it. And one more thing, if like Scott had the headaches for a few days, I had it for probably 5 days or so. I don't know if you've ever, maybe if you like broccoli and you have it for a while, and then if you, stop eating it for, several days, do you ever come down with one of those broccoli headaches? No, you don't, because it's not a drug. Caffeine is literally a drug that gives you a side effect when you come off of it. And so, for me, I'm just looking for things that don't have the side effects.
Yeah, in alcohol too, I think I read 1 out of every 6 people that ever tastes alcohol ends up with a problem, a drinking problem. And it's like huge proportions of the majority of people say, somebody I know or somebody in my extended family is an alcoholic. And it's like, why ever touch this stuff if you can gain all the benefits that wine supposedly has? Oh, and by the way, the French paradox, which you were talking about, I remember reading like 3-4 years ago, maybe it was this big mea culpa out of, one of our major health institutes. I can't remember what university or what medical establishment it was, but basically they revisited all the research that said supposedly there's a heart disease risk benefit from drinking alcohol in moderation. And they're like, whoops, we got it actually wrong. So it used to be, okay, we all know there's an increased risk of cancer when you consume alcohol, but there's a decreased risk of heart disease when you consume alcohol. So let's go ahead and recommend it for the heart disease, as if I want that trade-off necessarily. But then they go, whoops, actually there's no heart disease benefit, as you explained from the French paradox. But even American establishment health institute, who've been recommending these things for decades, wine and drinking in moderation, so-called, but even just one drink impairs my frontal lobe's ability, which again, going to the spiritual, goes to self-control, goes to executive function. And even if you're a secular listener going, well, I'm not, really coming from that perspective, but every single one of us wants more self-control in our lives and a better functioning frontal lobe. So, yeah, we've hit, kind of some of the problem beverages. Do you want to go into any more of those, or do you have some content that you could share with our listeners also on what to drink, and follow up on anything I said or any comments too? Don't feel you have to go there right away, but I want to take us there.
Yeah, let's transition mainly to what's best for us. And you can kind of probably guess where I'm going with that. But looking at something as simple as water and happiness. Now, this is a simple study. Correlation is not always causation. But they did a study where they simply surveyed people how many glasses of water they drink a day on a daily basis. And what they found is that people who drink 6 glasses of water per day or more were over 3 times more likely to say that they were very happy compared to those who drank less than 1 glass of water per day. And I was one of those people who drank less than a glass of water per day. I almost never drank a glass of water, almost never. And now I almost exclusively drink water. There's a few other things I'll drink from time to time, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But it's something, well, you might think, well, okay, if you drink 6 glasses a day, I'm doing good because I drink 8 Mountain Dews a day, so I must be doing fantastic. Well, they did research on that too in a separate study, and higher consumption of soda is associated with higher rates of depression. And so it's probably part of the benefit of water is that you're not putting in your body something else, and that could be soda or other sugary drinks and these kinds of things. And so I don't think almost anybody truly thinks that soda is a health food. We kind of recognize sugary drinks, but even when it comes to the non-sugary sodas, the diet sodas, they sometimes are shown to have a higher risk for diabetes, even though they have no glycemic impact from the drink itself. It's hard to say exactly what may be causing that, but you typically don't see healthy people drinking diet soda, and that's because they're not trying to diet. But you'll probably find you're better off just not putting chemicals like that in your body. Now,
Chad, I got to jump in on that one, because did you see? I think it was like 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago. World Health Organization actually came out and said, yeah, aspartame we do not recommend. After all, that's the artificial sweetener in most of the diet sodas for the entirety of our lifetime, pretty much. So it's like the science catches up with reality. So thank you for bringing that in about diet sodas, because a lot of us would think that's a healthy option because I'm going low sugar. But are there some drink? There's these trendy drinks out with that are sugar free, but also don't have aspartame or Splenda or all of these different kind of chemical sweeteners. They have just a little bit of flavor. What is that called? The LaCroix, the Zevia with the stevia in it. What's your take on those ones? I'm getting you that water is awesome, but what about some of those non-sugar, non-caffeine, non-alcohol, maybe kind of sweetened or flavored beverages?
And they're likely going to be better than the whole sugar sweetened things. I don't know enough because I haven't looked into specifically as far as LaCroix and the different specific drinks. But one of the things that I know now that you can do that is healthy, that especially if you do it in a moderate amount, if you struggle just drinking water, you can add to it some lemon juice to kind of give it a better flavor for those of you who just struggle with drinking straight water. But in time, you'll get used to normal water anyway, and you get to the point where that's what you really truly want. But one thing about using too much lemon is lemon is good for you, but it can be, if you have sensitive teeth, it can be a little bit hard on the teeth if you're consistently using lemon juice.
I use it first thing in the morning. But my water first thing in the morning has lemon in it, but that's it for the day. And then I'm just drinking water all day long.
And you probably have better teeth than me, Scott, too. So you probably, I have much lemon. I just feel it in my teeth.
Hey, by the way,
everybody's got to work with
you were talking drinking 6 glasses of water per day increased your happiness threefold versus the chances that you are considering yourself a happy person versus when somebody who's drinking 1 glass. And one thing you mentioned in there was that's probably because we're discarding a lot of the junk drinks to replace it with water. But do you also have research on drinking water versus being dehydrated and the benefits of that?
Yeah. That is one thing too, is that if you've ever felt it, people can see it in me. I have it. People will, if I'm dehydrated, people will look at me and say, you look tired. So this is not a study. This is just, you can see it in my eyes for whatever reason. It just sticks out because I notice it consistently. And someone will say, are you tired? And I'll know, actually, I'm not tired. I'm dehydrated. And if I drink water, people won't say that to me. So there is something about dehydration it's not like a disease, long-term disease, but you are not at ease when you are dehydrated. It is not a good feeling. But when you are adequately hydrated, now you can overhydrate too. You could kill yourself with water, but it's very unlikely to happen. It's typically if you're imbalancing your electrolytes, they go way down. You could die from that. But being adequately hydrated, it's an upper. It feels good to do that. And so I do think it's more, I think you're right, Scott, than simply what you're avoiding. You're getting enough hydration to all your organs, to your brain, everything. And as a result, you're going to feel more stable as a result.
Yeah. And I know people who get a headache and we think, I've got a headache. I need an aspirin. Like I must have an aspirin deficiency or something. It's like, no, ask, why do I have the headache? And oftentimes it's just dehydration. Sometimes it's stress.
That's right.
Sometimes it's, you're coming off of caffeine and, there are other reasons for headaches,
Yep.
many reasons, but one of them, and the simplest to solve is, am I getting enough water? Am I drinking enough today? And as you're talking about proper hydration, I want to give our viewers like, okay, how much water should I be drinking in a given day or periods of the day? Is there best timing for drinking my water? Give us kind of like a water 101, how to do smart, not necessarily the brand, but actually, is distilled water better than other spring water and just drinking it out of your tap? What's in the tap water? I mean, you could give a whole hour lecture on water, I'm sure, but give us kind of, some of your Coles notes.
So I've heard a number of things, a number of suggestions, and we've even suggested things that we've heard from medical professionals in the past. Like some say like half your body weight in ounces. So if you're 100 pounds, maybe 50 ounces a day, and that might be kind of a general beneficial thing. But part of what it is if your urine is a deep dark yellow, it means that you're probably slightly dehydrated. Maybe not massively, but if it's quite dark, you're somewhat dehydrated. And you don't necessarily have to have your urine as clear as water, because that you might be flushing out too much of your electrolytes. But one of the ways is if you're kind of, when you urinate, you notice that it's pretty light colored. It's not very dark. So it's not an exact amount for every single person, because if you're running a marathon, you're going to need a lot in a day. If you're working hard outside doing construction, you're going to need significantly more than somebody who's sitting at a desk job in a cool building and they're not sweating. So there's not an exact number, but like I said, one of the ways to test for it the best is just to look at your urine. Is it dark yellow? Now there are other things that can make it dark yellow, like taking vitamins or pills can sometimes give you, so that can throw it off a little bit. But if you're not taking a bunch of supplements or vitamins or medication in general, if it's not perfectly clear but just slightly yellow, that means you're probably pretty well hydrated. And when to use it is, once again, and we'll get right back to when to do it, except for one of the best times is first thing upon rising. If you've slept through the night without drinking any water during the night, your body should be slightly dehydrated in the morning because you haven't drank anything for maybe 8 hours. And so right away, and one of the reasons why people start feeling like they wake up because they drink some caffeine in the morning is because you are starting to hydrate your body. And so you can do the same thing without the coffee or caffeinated beverages by simply drinking water. What you're going to do is you're going to start, when you're dehydrated, your blood is not the exact right wording, but your blood is a little bit, it's more sluggish, it's thicker. And so as you drink the water, it's going to become, it's going to flow through your blood vessels and your capillaries, your whole body. It's going to flow much easier. So that's something to consider. First thing in the morning, do drink some water. And here's an interesting study on that, on when to drink. Well, Loma Linda University did a study on blood fluidity. The term that the researchers use for this is hemorrheology. It literally means like blood fluidity. And they studied over 20,000 people, and they discovered that those who drank 5 or more glasses of water had about a 50% less chance of a heart attack compared to those who drank 2 glasses of water or less than 2 glasses of water per day. So that's massive. And that's the number one killer, by the way, heart attack. And so if you just drink 5 glasses of water per day, and that's not really that hard to do. I mean, in the beginning, if you're not used to it, it's kind of hard. And what they found is that all other liquids that were consumed had the opposite effect. Every other liquid, whether it was sugary drinks, even fruit juices, did not have the same benefit as the water itself. So, and they also find that drinking a glass of water right before bed, right before you go to bed. Now, it's kind of a bummer if you get up to go to the bathroom all the time because of it, but it can lower your risk of having a heart attack during the night by around 50% also. So 1 glass before bed can keep you hydrated a bit. You're still going to be a bit dehydrated by morning, but that's something to really consider, drinking water to avoid the number one cause of death, or at least make it less likely anyway. And 2 more studies, and then, if anybody has any questions or what have you. But this was also talking about the when. Well, they did a study at the University of Birmingham, and they had all subjects. They were given a weight consultation, and they did 2 groups. One group, they told them, okay, when you go into eating a meal, just imagine that you feel full before you even start the meal. Just, use your imagination. The second group, they told them to drink 500 milliliters of water, which is just north of 2 cups. It's like basically 2 cups of water, 30 minutes before the meal. And by the way, by the time you get there, it's already pretty much going to be out of the stomach. So it's not that's water is going to be blocking the food or something, or displacing the food. So, but what ended up happening was those who used their imagination to tell themselves that they were full when they started the meal, they lost about 1.76 pounds, or about 0.8 kilograms of weight. So they did lose some weight as a result of that. But those who drank 2 cups of water 30 minutes before the meal, averaged weight loss was 9.46 pounds.
Wow.
That is significant. And so when should you drink? One of the best times to do it is not so much with the meal, but before the meal. Because if you're thoroughly dehydrated with the meal, and part of what it is people often think, well, if you drink with the meal, you'll displace something and then you won't eat as much. But there can be positives to that, but there's really negatives in the long run. I would rather do beforehand, roughly a half an hour, and it can help you lose weight if you need to. But the other thing that can happen, I don't want to go too much into the physiology, but constantly, there was a popular idea that you should eat like 5 or 6 meals a day, and they say, oh, that's the best for weight loss. And people couldn't really point to a study to back that up. It was just like the bro science in the gym, somebody tells you that in the gym, but you got to put it to the test. You need to do a study to find out, is it true or is it not true? And they have found that it's simply not true, that less meals per day is equated with lower weight. I mean, for every lower meal, you can look at a chart where they give 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day, 3 meals a day, 4 meals a day, or 3, 4, 5, 6. And you see a stepwise progression. The more meals a day, the more people, the more weight they have, and so, or the more weight they gain. And so the opposite is true, and probably about the best for people who are not too thin. For your average person, about 2 meals a day is generally about the best. But there's one thing: if you're having a bunch of meals all the time, or a meal and then a snack and a meal and a snack and a meal and a snack, what happens is you have something called IDEs, insulin degrading enzymes. So every time you have a meal, you're going to increase your blood sugar to some capacity, and the body's going to send out insulin to which connects to your muscle cells, your liver cells. It's like a key to open your cells so that the glucose, the sugar, can get in the cell. But if you have too high insulin, the body has to clean up that insulin, and so it sends something out called insulin degrading enzymes. But the insulin degrading enzymes have 2 jobs. One job is the one I just talked about, to clean up excess insulin. The second job they have is very important. The second job they have is cleaning up the plaques in your brain, the things that may lead to something like dementia or Alzheimer's. But the problem is, if you are continually eating meals and constantly having blood sugar spikes and then insulin spikes, those insulin degrading enzymes, they're going to be so busy at work trying to clean up the insulin that they're not going to have enough time to clean up potentially the plaque within the brain. So in general, it's better to have fewer meals, eat a whole meal, let the food fully digest, and then wait till the next meal. And at most 3 meals a day. I mean, if you're a diabetic and your blood sugar drops, yes, you have to put something in. We understand that. But we're talking people in general who are healthy. 2 to 3 meals at most. If you're skinny, you'll probably want to do too skinny. You probably want to do the 3. I could go on and on about the research, but that's not about how many times to eat. 2 more things. So even though it's not just pure water, a grape juice is an interesting drink that it's strangely enough, even though you think, oh, grapes, sugary, grape juice is a low glycemic drink. And for some people who have menstrual issues, they're having terrible pain during that time of the month. Some of them have so much pain that it's hard for them to eat, or they'll feel like vomiting if they eat. One of the things they may find is drinking some grape juice can settle down the stomach trouble, the indigestion, and make them better able to even take in food during that time period. So grape juice is a special drink, and that doesn't mean you need to drink it all the time every day. But in general, there's some very special things about grape juice. One more thing, and then we'll be done as far as kind of the presentation. If you've ever had, I grow lemon balm right outside my front door, and you can make lemon balm tea, just taking the dry leaves and taking maybe a teaspoon of it. It's one of the best smelling things in the world, is just rubbing your hands on some lemon balm and smelling it. It just has that beautiful citrusy smell, and it's just a simple little plant that runs along the ground. Well, they did some research on lemon balm, also called Melissa officinalis, which is the Latin term for it. And they found that we've known for some time that has a mild calming sedative effect, but they hadn't done a study to try to stress people out and then give it to them to see if it truly does work. And so researchers did a placebo-controlled, double-blind crossover study. I love crossover studies because what you do with a crossover study is, because let's say you have 2 different groups and they do 2 different things, and one works over on this group and it doesn't work on the other group. Well, you could say, well, who knows? Maybe it wouldn't work. Maybe it wouldn't have worked if you switched them back and forth. But a crossover trial, they both tried the same thing. They tried the placebo and they tried the active ingredient, both of them, so they can find out, well, what does it do to everybody, at least in that particular study. So in this study, they had a placebo control, so they did have a placebo, and then they did 2 different things. In this one, it's not tea, but you can make a tea, and speaking of drinking, you can make a tea out of it. It's a great tasting tea anyway. But in this study, they had placebo versus 300 milligrams or 600 milligrams of lemon balm, and so what they ended up finding to see if it would make, and then they stressed them out. They actively tried to annoy these people and stress them out in some capacity. And while taking the 600 milligrams of lemon balm, they had an increase in calmness during the stressor. The trouble was they were less alert when they took the 600 milligrams. But on the other hand, on those 2 who took the 300 milligrams, they had all the benefit, and they had enhanced, They had enhanced mathematical processing without lowering their accuracy. So they didn't get kind of spaced out or, too much. And the reason I say this is because often people think with something like a remedy, if 1 is good, 10 is better. But in reality, no, that there's even to be judicious, not overdoing even a good thing. So something for stress or anxiety, lemon balm has been shown to be beneficial for that. As I mentioned already, hops tea can do the same thing, except for it can also help you fall asleep. So you might not want to take that right before, getting on the road and driving or something like that, but you could do it before bed. So there are things that we can do, but even when it comes to anything other than water, I would make, if you're going to have optimal health, make your main beverage water. Water is one of the best things you can do. And I guess once again, they'll come to, what about, do you want to use just filtered water, reverse osmosis? Do you want distilled water? Probably, I know there's people say, oh, if you use distilled, you're going to miss some vitamins or minerals or whatever, or minerals. But in reality, you shouldn't be seeking to get most of your minerals from your water anyway, because one source is going to have some amount and another one's going to have another. So they're not very, it's probably not the most stable way to get your minerals anyway. So, if it's good, healthy, clean water, whether it's filtered, if you have well water. I know Scott has well water. I have well water. The health center we're working in has well water. And I would filter your water, especially with well water, even if it's like mine was, super good tasting water at home. So you think, who cares? We had it tested. It was fine. But research shows that people who drink well water are at an increased risk of Parkinson's disease, and it's likely in part because you can get small amounts of bacteria in the well casing, potentially, or down in the earth. And so filtering it is going to help, hopefully, avoid something like that. But otherwise, I actually like having a well, so I don't have a problem with it. I would just seek to filter
I
it.
love well water. We filter ours mainly because we live in an agricultural belt, so they're spraying the crops all the time, and that's just a hazard we'd like to avoid. We live in the woods, so we're protected from a lot of that, through the winds. But hey, we have a live audience. You guys have some questions loaded up. Jace, get those up on the screen, and we'll see if we can get some answers to some of our questions out there. Diana Sotomayor says, "What about coconut water, Chad, when you're dehydrated?"
So if you're dehydrated, something like coconut water can be fine. I wouldn't make it the main thing you drink all the time, but it's something if you're low, maybe you're exercising a lot, something like that can be just fine. It's in here and there. Make it a special drink from time to time, or if you're low on electrolytes, something like that can be beneficial. If you're exercising very rigorously, yes, perfectly fine. But it's, once again, I wouldn't drink that all day and hope you're going to get the same benefits of drinking water.
Okay, good. And sometimes don't you put mineral salt in the water? If you're just drinking water and you're afraid of the electrolytes draining, put some Celtic sea salt in there.
Yeah, so I have a unusual, and there may be some people listening along or watching along today that have the same thing. It's not super common. It runs in my family. We can get what's called hyponatremia, which is too low sodium in the blood, and that can mean too low salt. My grandfather was in the hospital with low sodium. My uncle was, and I never had to go to the hospital, but I've had blood tests and I was low, not like exceedingly low, but low. And I noticed when I get really low, you lose your energy if your electrolytes get too low. And so if you're one of those people, or you're afraid of getting too low, most people don't need to do it all the time if they're not exercising rigorously, or if you don't have my condition. But I do from time to time put maybe a quarter teaspoon of salt in, you put in about a quart of water. It won't even change. It's not like drinking, ocean water or something where it's so salty. It's a very small amount, but that can help you to not lose out on some of the electrolytes that you might be getting too low.
Excellent. Who else is listening today? Where should we say hi to people from? We got Queen. Is the rise mushroom coffee the same thing as regular coffee beans, or is it actually good for you?
I do not know that specific mushroom coffee. I do not know, so I can't say for sure. There are coffee substitutes made of grains and so forth that taste very similar. I tried one. Somebody sent it to me, and it was called Fig, like a fig tree or the fig fruit. They're Cafix. There's one there. Yep. And obviously, I don't think any of us have any connection to Cafix. We're not making. But yes, there are grain-based coffee substitutes that are just fine. And Fig is another one where it's actually the one that I tried, and I don't even seek them out, but I used to love straight black coffee, and they have found when I tried that Fig, it tasted to me identical to black coffee. So if you're looking for a substitute where you don't have to have the caffeine, they are out there, and you can likely find. You may have to try a few before you found something you really.
When I got off caffeine, I did do some of those substitutes, but it was mainly because the drink was a vehicle for creamer and sugar. Like, it's a quasi ice cream drink. So yeah, if you really love the flavor of unsweetened, uncreamed coffee, then yeah, I guess try one of those grainers. Cheryl says, what about blood sugar consistency, though, to keep it leveled out? I'm not sure what the context was. We covered a lot of ground. You have a guess of where she was bringing that in?
Yeah. I'm guessing that's the question in regard to what I said about eating 6 meals a day versus 2 meals a day. And the you so I could I can't remember if we did a whole presentation on your channel yet, but if you look into, there are different ways to stabilize blood sugar. The most popular one today is the ketogenic diet. But the ketogenic diet over time, strangely enough, can do the opposite of what it's supposed to do, and that's to stabilize your insulin levels or stabilize your blood sugar. Over time, it can actually start to cause a rise, because what it can do is the fat can clog up, there's something called intramyocellular lipid. You can actually put too much fat within the cells, the muscle cells, the liver cells, and what it can do is block the insulin's work. And over time, if you eat anything with carbohydrates, like you have an apple, boom, your blood sugar spikes, and you think, oh, it's the apple's fault. When in actuality, it's your cell is being clogged with fat. You don't have to be fat to have insulin resistance, but it's kind of like if somebody came to your house and stuck bubble gum in your keyhole, and you have a good key and there's a good keyhole, but something's gunking it up. And the best thing to do would be to get that gunk out of there, the gum in that case. You'd be able to open the door and get right in. So too with your muscle cells, your liver cells, they want something to come in. They want energy to come in, whether it's in the form of the ketones or standard glucose, which our bodies are designed to run off of. And when we get too much fat, that can basically stop the sugar from getting in, the glucose from getting in. And as a result, it sits in the bloodstream and you have high blood sugar and you think it's the sugar's fault. But in reality, it's the fact that you're insulin resistant. So I don't want to go into, I could go on for an hour easily, hours on this.
Chad,
but
could you plug your Overcoming Diabetes seminar here? Just because, what you just gave in 4 minutes there's a whole wealth of knowledge behind, and it can be really helpful to people who are struggling with blood sugar and insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes.
Yes. And so if you can even just go on Google, type my name, Chad Kreuzer, and look up diabetes, Chad Kreuzer diabetes. You'll see some of my presentations on that, where I go point by point through the research, through the studies that are out there. And so it's not that the fear in the low carb group is that any spike in blood sugar, and I don't mean spike like diabetic spike. Yes, diabetic spike like hitting 200 blood sugar, that is not healthy. That's dangerous. That means you're a full-blown diabetic, whether type 1, type 2, type 1.5, whatever. But if you hit 200, you're a diabetic. But should you be spiking up a little bit, 130, maybe almost 140 after a meal? I mean, that's normal. We don't have any evidence. They say, oh, the goal in life is to never have your blood sugar go up. That's like saying the goal in life is never have your blood pressure go up ever. Well, no, that's not true. Your blood pressure should go up when you go for a run. That's like saying you should always have slow, deep breathing 100% of the time. Well, if you're sitting around, comfortably, yes, but there are times to push the body. And so a meal time is to have that there should be some little blood sugar spike, not massive, not a massively high one. So but I go into more detail. I don't want to get off too far on that, but you can have healthy blood sugar, even eating plenty of good, healthy carbohydrates. And we're not talking about candy bars or sugar. We're talking about whole things like fruit and vegetables, even whole grains, where if you're spiking with whole grains and fruit, that means you are insulin resistant, and you want to learn, how can I reverse the insulin resistance? And you should be able to eat a banana and not have a blood sugar spike. You shouldn't have a blood sugar spike. I can eat these things no problem. And most people, the vast majority, if your pancreas is still working, you can have relatively stable, good, healthy blood sugar, small spikes, healthy ones, and then they'll come back down and you'll stay stable. But check out Chad Kreuzer and then diabetes. You should find some of my videos.
Yeah, excellent. Chad, when you were talking about drinking before you eat, I think it was in the context of that too. And it was like how many meals per day, and you lose weight when you drink 30 minutes before you eat. I was thinking about, how caffeine reduces your self-control. So if you swap caffeine, because if you have lower self-control, I've been there, you're more likely to, grab a candy bar, junk food or whatever. So you increase your self-control by getting rid of the caffeinated beverages and then replace it with water 30 minutes before the meal. And that's like a win-win for weight management, because you're not eating the junk food as much. And most of us aren't taking our caffeine calorie free, like I was saying earlier. There's ice cream. But hey, let's go to another question. Oh, thanks for the questions. I guess that's it. So we are wrapping up here. And I want to thank our guest. What's next week? Yeah, okay. We got a few things happening at once, but first I'll just talk to Chad. Thank you, Chad, for being here. folks can find you at your Health and Homestead YouTube channel. And I'm excited to learn more about Forest Hill Wellness in Ohio that you're the director of.
And just very quick on that, it's right now the website, we have Forest Hill Wellness, but that's not connected yet, but it's foresthillcenter.com. If you want to learn more about our lifestyle center, we're starting foresthillcenter.com.
Excellent. And there's the QR code for the Health and Homestead channel. And I want to talk to each of our listeners too. You guys just endured not the easiest set of health truths to digest, because sometimes we're confronted with like almost all of us are taking caffeine, right? And Chad's bringing research that's stretching us. And I appreciate the listeners being open-minded and having the courage really to give that a consideration. And if you go forward with it, I can tell you from the other side, I have more energy than when I drank energy drinks, right? Because I'm living on actual food that God designed for us to live on. So just thank you to each and every one of our listeners. We love each and every one of you guys. Don't forget to get a copy of The Great Controversy. I'm happy to share that. That's just something I do on the side in ministry. And then, who is our guest next week? Melissa Summers on the world of supplements. We'll discover how to implement supplements to improve health. Join us Wednesday, September 10, 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central for LSR Live. Once again, we will be live, so bring your questions because supplements are a complex world. So we'll discuss. We'll see if we can get to an understanding of that. And thanks, of course, to CDN for producing this program. You can follow their QR code to go to their YouTube channel, From Likes to Lives Changed. And I'm Scott Ritzema, your host. Been a pleasure, blessing, and a delight to be with each one of you. And my prayer is that you would be happy, healthy, and with Jesus in your life, growing to the knowledge of our Lord and Savior unto a heavenly, eternal life. So we'll see you all next time.